Well, thank you for joining, everyone. Hope you're all having a great Wednesday. We are here today as part of the ADASH Collaborative. We're having a webinar series, and today we're going to be covering the topic blurred lines, discrimination, harassment, and assault. And this is the first of a four-part series that's designed to help educate and spark conversation and culture shift towards more welcoming outdoor and river-based workspaces free from sexual harassment and discrimination. So thank you all for joining us. Again, this is part of the ADASH Collaborative's webinar series. The ADASH Collaborative stands for Anti-Discrimination and Sexual Harassment Collaborative. My name's Angie Braley, and I'm going to be helping out just kind of behind the scenes today with Zoom. So if you're having any technical issues, feel free to reach out. You might have noticed we are recording. We will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And we also have some closed captioning available if you need that. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Myra Strand, who's joining us, and she can introduce herself and then take it away.
All right, thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. I'm excited to talk about this topic, and we have a lot of directions we can go with this conversation. A little bit about me first and foremost. My name's Myra Strand. I'm the owner of Strand Squared Solutions, which is a small training and technical assistance company out of New York. I mostly work in the field and the area of criminal justice. I've been in that I've been working with trauma and victimization in one way or another since the mid-1990s. I've worked with all different types of victims of crime. I've worked in spaces of incarceration, both adults and adolescents. I've worked in family court, helping people navigate divorces and custodies while they're navigating domestic abuse. And I've spent time working with people with, complicated minds like serious mental health issues or developmental disabilities. I've spent just a little bit of time on boats and rivers. I think in my early days, I taught kayaking at a summer camp for a couple summers, and I like to do stand-up paddleboarding. The way I ended up working in this community from time to time was just probably proximity. Is I used to do a lot of work. I used to live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I used to work really close to the Grand Canyon. So I had a lot of opportunity to overlap with some of the outfitters in that particular area around these particular topics. So these discussions, I wouldn't call this a training because it's only an hour long. So it's more of just a discussion, which means that we can go in a lot of different directions. And I hope that you all are interested in participating, in some way. We can participate by, you can take yourself off mute, you can jump on and we can have a conversation, you can ask questions, you can jump on the chat if I say something that resonates with you, or if you have an additional resource, or you have something to say, feel free to drop it in the chat because there's a lot of wisdom in this room already. And I'm sure that a lot of you are already coming here with resources and ideas and possibilities, right? For now, I'm really interested to find out who you are. So maybe you can drop into the chat what your name is, where do you work, what do you do at work, and what is your hope for this hour? Because I think that we can take this discussion in several different ways. And for those of you who do have your cameras on, I really appreciate that. I'm presenting in a mudroom that's like in my house, like it's off to the side of my house. And it really makes a difference to me when I can see faces, so I really appreciate like having that like feedback and being able to see like, when ideas are dropping or when facial expressions are fascinating. So it really does make a difference. So while people are entering this information into their chat, where you work, what your name is, what your hope is for this hour, I'm going to go ahead and move on, and then we'll come back to the chat. One of the things, let's see, did I just lose everybody? No. Okay, there you are. One of the things that I want to just start from the beginning is that there's a possibility that some people might experience a trauma echo or something from this particular training, right? Like it's possible for you to be provoked or that some of the content might spark up old feelings. I like to call them trauma echoes. I know that the field is moving away from the idea of triggers, right? And which makes a lot of sense. What I would really encourage you to do is to when you experience a trauma echo, like when you feel it in your body, maybe pause and write that down. Remember that this is going to be written down, this is going to be recorded, right? So it's possible for you to come back later and view it. So if you experience a trauma echo, write it down, take it with you to your therapist, to your trusted confidant, because there's no reason why we have to live with these. I think historically we would do trigger warning, but it's not really how triggers work. And I think that we can move past the trauma echoes if we just learn some coping mechanisms and learn how to navigate some of those complicated moments. Personally, I like to use my glimmers. Did you know a glimmer is the opposite of a trauma echo? A glimmer is guided by your ventral vagal system and it makes you feel safe and connected to other people. And sometimes simply calling attention to your glimmer can bring that return to autonomic regulation, which I think is really powerful. And it's a great place to start off with, right? It's a great place to be. So let's see who we have here. We've got some people. We've got people from Colorado. That's amazing, right? We've got the office manager for the Grand Canyon, River Outfitters. We've got Oars, right? I think I've done some connections with Oars before. And then the Forest Service, BLM, and then of course RMS. All right, so we've got a great community here. So all of you are really, there's so much possibility in space like this. Like there's so much possibility of you all bringing new information to the space. So please feel free to interact in the screen or in the chat. So then that way we can all make a difference in that space. All right. So let's see. I don't think anybody really articulated a lot of hopes. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to move forward with some of the content. And please feel free to interrupt. Please jump in the chat. Please, if we want to make this interactive, that would be useful. It makes a big difference. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about some of these things, right? How sexual harassment creeps into the workplace and when it becomes assault and some effective strategies, right? But we're going to do this in a very bouncy, non-sequential kind of way because frankly, that's just how my brain works. So first, let's define some words. Sometimes we'll use the word sexual misconduct. And it's an appropriate word, but it covers a lot of different things, right? Like sexual harassment is under there, but then also is fondling, dating violence, rape, stalking, sexual exploitation, domestic violence, sexual harassment, and retaliation. And so I think it's important for us to make sure we're using the right words to describe things. In this training, we're really going to be spending the most time talking about sexual harassment. I want to weave in discrimination and bias too, because frankly, they're kind of cut from the same cloth. And an atmosphere that is open to sexual harassment is also open to discrimination in other ways, like racial discrimination or homophobia or ableism. Like these are all kind of woven together. We have a tendency in the world to think about all these dynamics happening in different silos, but in the real world, it doesn't actually happen in silos. It's all part of the same energy, if you will. It's all part of the same vibe, the same continuum of toxic behavior. Right. So we want to make sure that we kind of see that as this fluid expression of things. There's 4 different types of sexual harassment: verbal, written, physical, nonverbal, visual, right? Like there's all these different ways in which it can occur. And I think that that's important to understand because we sometimes really focus on the verbal or the physical, right? We talk about that, but we don't realize that even things like having pornographic images on on a picture or a poster, or showing somebody some images can be really problematic. And we don't always focus on things that are like nonverbal, like ogling or looking at a person's body up and down. Like those ones are harder to pin and harder to act upon, right? So it's really problematic in so many different ways. Sexual harassment let's look at it another way, right? Like it could be unwanted flirting, catcalling, touching without consent, sexual favors, right? Crude gestures and jokes. Like there's a lot of different things and a lot of different ways in which it can happen. Oops, I don't know why that just jumped all by itself. Let's fix it. All right. So when it comes to discrimination, it's useful. Let's see, did it on my end, everything just flashed. Let me make sure. Okay.
Yeah, it looks good on our end.
Okay. On my end, everything just flashed and got really weird for just a second. So, okay, we're good. So when it comes to sexual harassment, we want to make sure that we're understanding, that it can be anything from jokes to unwanted flirting to touching without consent to sexual favors to catcalling. Now, this is where it gets dodgy, is the touching with consent. And I want to kind of put a pin on that because we want to talk about that specifically. Now, discrimination is when persons in similar situations are treated differently, less favorably, or without objective or reasonable justification, right? So discrimination is similar to sexual harassment because it's the microaggressions and the behaviors that come because of things like race, ethnicity, religion, disability, age, gender, sexual orientation. This list can be very exhaustive because there can be lots of different ways in which a person can experience discrimination, and that discrimination kind of happens tangibly, right? These things are inherently linked. They're together. They're related, right? So let's look at an example of sexual harassment. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to show, it's a film clip from an alcohol serving establishment where somebody is experiencing sexual harassment. One of the things that I want to really pay attention to in this space is that it's coming in small blurbs, right? It's almost as if the person who's practicing the abuse is testing the environment. There's this thing called neuroception. It's a function of the brain. And our brains are always mapping the environment in front of us, trying to determine whether you're safe or not, right? And frankly, your brain only tells you if you're safe or not safe. There might be moments of freezing. In fact, anytime the brain decides you're not safe, it starts with detection freezing, right? There's always this moment you're mapping to safety, everything is really great, everything's wonderful, until suddenly things are not great. And your brain will pause for just a second. That's called detection freezing. Now, some people will go into tonic immobility, or they might go into a form of collapse, right? That's why we say fight, flight, or freeze. But everybody starts with freezing, detection freezing, and then suddenly their brains are mapping them to threat, right? So it's like you're mapping to safety, mapping to safety. Now, the same thing happens for people who are predatory and they're trying to test the environment. They're trying to figure out if they're safe in this environment. This is the goal here. When we're trying to create a healthy work environment and we're trying to like decrease behaviors like sexual harassment or microaggressions or discrimination, things like that, what we have to do is we have to make sure that everybody's brain is mapping to safety when things are healthy. And we want to make sure that people who are predatory or are doing toxic things are not mapping to safety in that environment, right? Because they all throw out test balloons. We all throw out test balloons. In my experience working with victims of crime, doing interviews, oftentimes they'll start off with telling just like a little bit of the experience, like I experienced this, and then they pause and they're waiting to see if they can continue mapping to safety with you, because so many people are so judgmental when it comes to that first disclosure. Same with people who are predatory, right? They'll say something, they throw out a test balloon, and then they pause and they see if they can push the boundary a little bit further, right? And you'll see this in your environment. It'll always start with just like an off-colored joke, or it'll start with just a pushing of the boundary, and then they're kind of feeling out the environment. Am I going to get away with this kind of behavior in this environment? Is this the kind of environment where people are not going to say anything, where they're going to allow me to have free range of this toxic behavior? So let's watch.
Is this your first shift?
Yeah. Have you worked here for a while?
Yeah, man, this is going on my 3rd year.
Cool.
I actually worked here, what, a year and a half before Livia. How did you meet Livia?
Oh, we used to go surfing together.
Really?
Yeah.
Surfing? No
Surfing
shit.
camp.
Surfing camp? It's kind of hot. You and Livia, little bikinis, waves crashing on the shore, trying to keep them up.
See how he pauses?
With all the talk that happens here, believe me, I was being subtle saying that. Because the guys in here, it's a lot. Did Livia kind of give you the rundown?
Yeah. It's not my first time bartending, so.
It's a sausage party in here.
It's fine. I'm very familiar.
Yeah, because you're a sexy girl, Sam.
Thanks.
Welcome. Guys are going to be coming up to you all the time, I can already tell.
Well, I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah. Know about that. They're going to be like, hey, sexy ass you got going on over there. Does that sexy ass have a telephone number I can call?
Oh, God.
I'm serious, and I'm...
See, he just continues going on and on to the point where he actually even grabs her behind and he bites her ear as an example of what she's going to experience as a bartender, right? He's gaslighting her while sexually harassing her. Now, here's the thing, is there's this line between sexual harassment and sexual assault, and it's so important for us to really become familiar with this line. I'm often called to consult on sexual harassment cases, and when I ask, tell me about the experience, more often than not, it's not sexual harassment, but actually has moved into that space of sexual assault, right? Because it's an easy journey. So let's look at the journey for just a second, right? We've got these social norms of entitlement. That's the red balloons area. That's the part where people are sending out test balloons. Maybe, people who practice abuse even have this individual belief system that justifies the aggression. There might be an invasion of space. And if you notice with that guy, he started out invading her personal space pretty fast, right? Which moves into the sexual harassment using those types of behaviors that we identified earlier, the unwanted flirting, the the touching without consent, that sort of stuff, the crude gestures, the complicated wording, right? So all that was happening. And then of course he touched her, right? Unwanted touch. Like first he's touching just her arm, but eventually he moves into some of the more private parts of her body, which is when we start moving into areas that are considered illegal. Now, one of the places, and I highly recommend this on 5 levels because I think that they do amazing stuff. The Department of Defense, they get a lot of bad press, bad media for their response to things like domestic violence and sexual assault and things like that. Like there's a lot of newspaper articles about rape in the media and things like that. But I want to just tell you right from the get-go that the response that the Department of Defense has to sexual harassment, sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse is crimes against people, frankly, is much more sophisticated than the civilian world and much more sophisticated and much more consistent, right? Like in some parts of the country, some of our criminal justice systems have really great responses to these things, but then there's others that they're just a little outdated and old. So I like to go to the Department of Defense to see some of the things they're doing. Like, for example, a couple years ago in Department of Defense, they actually made sexual harassment a crime, right? And it's not a crime in the civilian world. It's still an issue of human resources. So this is a chart from the Department of Defense that they use, and they have this continuum of practice, right? They're working really hard to create healthy work environments. They're working so hard on their healthy work environments that last year, in 2023, they hired 3,000 primary prevention specialists, and they're really going after negative risk factors and positive factors to create healthy work environments, because there's a lot of spaces and a lot of toxicity in groups of people. right? So they're working really hard. What they've identified is that a healthy work environment has engaged leadership. It's one that really embraces their values and guiding principles. For this is an Army image, so it has the Army values. They have good order and discipline. They really promote dignity and respect as a social norm. They really promote ethical standards and ethical practice. They have some accountability, right? They're able to like have accountability in their spaces. It's a safe environment. They're aiming for having a safe environment. They're really focused on their warrior ethos and their civilian creed. So they really center in on their values and guiding principles. And they work a lot with those ideas, and it does seem to work. They focus really heavily on the early signs of toxic behaviors when it comes to that continuum of sexual violence, like excessive flirting, toxic atmosphere, inappropriate jokes and comments, disparaging comments on social media, and inappropriate work relationships, right? Like they spend a lot of time in that early space trying to figure out trying to intervene at that point, right? Once it gets to sexting, catcalls, sexual innuendos, cornering people or blocking people, or sexual oriented cadence or unsolicited sexual exploitations, texts, emails, at that point, there's going to be consequences in that spaces, right? But then once we get to the solicitation of naked pictures, touching, kissing, exposure, all that sort of stuff, that's considered illegal. And there's actually going to be legal ramifications for just this column of behavior. And it all really truly is to avoid this, right? So they put a lot of emphasis in this particular area. These two areas is where they spend their most time and their most resources, right? They're doing things like how to handle conflict, how to break up with somebody, how to have effective boundaries, right? How to get past being polite, how to talk, tell somebody, hey, that's an inappropriate joke, how to hear it when somebody, is trying to ask you to change. Like they spend a lot of time talking about interpersonal relationships because sexual harassment happens every day in so many different ways. Let's watch this.
Give us a smile, love.
Sorry?
Yeah, you look better when you smile.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Just going outside.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm alright.
So where are you going later?
I'm just waiting for a friend.
All right, so we get it, right? Now here's some new information. And I think that this is one of the things that we do have to recognize, and we have to function intersectionally because it makes a difference. One of the areas I think that some of these trainings really kind of miss the mark a little bit when it comes to sexual harassment is we're still functioning with this outdated idea that this is a crime against women. Now, disproportionately, women and girls are experiencing sexual harassment and assault, according to reports. But the more research we do in this particular area, the more that we find that men and boys are experiencing these dynamics as well, right? It's not just that men have women in their life that they love and they respect, so they want to do the things that are right for them, but that they are actually experiencing these dynamics too. It's just that historically we've lived in this space where men didn't have a voice or an opportunity to report. And then, of course, we're not doing a lot of effective research when it comes to people who are transgender or non-binary or fluid, or, actually people are now expressing their gender in more than 35 different ways, right? So this gets really complicated after a little while. I think we have to recognize that, one, we have to move beyond the binary, and two, we have to kind of create a space for men to be able to come forward. For other crime types, which are part of the part of the sexual violence continuum, like for example, commercial sexual exploitation of children, where children are being trafficked, for boys and men, that's almost 50% of victims are male, right? And the more we learn about sexual assault and the more community readiness there is in this area, the more men come forward. So I want to show this video about male victims of harassment.
As the Harvey Weinstein allegations continue, male celebrities have started to speak about their experiences of sexual assault and harassment.
At the beginning, yes, there were a few things like that, but you know, you avoid it. What's tried on women is tried on men as well.
This is being mirrored on Twitter, where men now account for just over 30% of the tweets using the #MeToo hashtag. So why have men, like many women, felt so unable to speak out before now? Statistics show that sexual assault predominantly affects women, which is something that, intuitively, we probably all know. However, this does not mean that men are never victims of sexual assault. Approximately 12,000 men every year are the victims of either rape or attempted rape in the UK. And it's estimated that only 4% of male sexual assaults are reported to the police. One concern voiced by male and female victims is that speaking out is pointless, because the conviction rates for sexual assaults are low. For men, this could be exacerbated by the fact that society often sees sexual assault as a crime committed by men on women. The #MeToo hashtag, for example, shows an overwhelming amount of women speaking about sexual harassment at the hands of men. So, for a man to speak out, he must overcome the misconception that men are always the perpetrators, not the victims. Masculinity dictates that men should be strong, stoic, infallible. In contrast, seeking the help of others is seen as a sign of weakness. Admitting to sexual assault can make men feel less manly, and the statistics suggest that manliness is important to them. In one study, 42% of men said they believe a man is mostly responsible for being emotionally strong and taking charge in a crisis, compared to 17% of women. A common theme among male rape survivors who seek help is the questioning of their own sexuality. They ask, "Why was I chosen?" And if they were abused by a man, "Does this make me gay?" This can be complicated by the fact that some victims of sexual assault can feel aroused during the crime, but victims of sexual assault are always just that, victims. The #MeToo hashtag shows that women are very good at offering one another visible, vocal support. Men, on the other hand, don't have a history of offering public support for one another. We have a long-standing mentality of dealing with problems alone. It means a man coming forward to talk about sexual assault doesn't know what territory he is walking into. There's little precedent. Some male victims of sexual assault talk about facing discrimination when seeking help. This year, victim Alex Morgan set up a website to help readdress the balance. He recalled reaching out to a rape crisis helpline after his attack, only to be told, "Men are the abusers, women are the victims. We need to terminate this call now so we can help victims." Arguably, it also doesn't help that, in the eyes of the law, a woman can't rape a man. It's a technical point, but it means men might feel less able to own their experience of sexual assault.
All right, so in the eyes of the law of the United States, a woman can rape a man, but it actually isn't very common for it to even be recognized, right? Like when a man experiences sexual assault at the hands where a woman is the perpetrator, oftentimes they think that they should feel grateful or they should be cheered upon. We see this a lot when it comes to like female teachers who are raping their students, who are minors. We see this like high-fiving kind of mentality in spaces like that. And we have to be very careful about spaces like that. And we have to be very aware that this manliness and the masculinity in the spaces sometimes contributes to men not coming forward. In fact, research shows that when a woman experiences rape or sexual assault, it takes about a month to 6 weeks for her to disclose to somebody, just one person, that something complicated happened to her, right? For a man, it takes about 22 to 25 years. And that's a really big deal. And I think that once we start to recognize that men too are also experiencing things like sexual harassment, discrimination, sexual assault, domestic violence, domestic abuse, teen dating violence, aggravated assaults, right? All these things, men are experiencing them. Then we're going to be able to have more male allies. We're going to have more people moving forward. Now, I do whole trainings focused on men. And after all of the trainings, men always come forward and they disclose and tell me about their experiences. And oftentimes I'm the first person that they've ever told because I'm the first person that's ever talked about it to them, right? Of course, I work a lot in the military spaces, so it's pretty common for me to be in a group full of men in that space. But this also begs the question that we have to think intersectionally when we're thinking about these dynamics, especially if we're going to intervene or if we're helping somebody transcend this particular trauma, right? Because all of the different identities that someone brings to the table is going to play a role in their barriers and how they're experiencing these dynamics. All right, so we have a couple choices here. One of the things that we can do is I want to talk about trauma, but I don't have enough time to talk about the full impact of trauma. So I'm going to give two choices and we're going to vote on it in the chat room because I want to make sure that people feel like they're getting what they want. I want to give you a couple choices here. We can talk about what happens to the brain when somebody experiences trauma and why people have complicated behaviors after they've experienced these things. We can talk about predators and predatory behavior so you can better understand it. Or we can talk about different strategies to make change in this area. So what would you all like to hear? You know, we have about half an hour left, and what would be useful for you? Maybe just throw it in the chat. Okay, so people have strategies for change. What happens to the brain? All right, so we've got a couple people for strategies for change. All right, so let's go ahead and move in that direction. Now, I kind of tricked you a little bit because I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain because I think that it's really important for us to know it, but I'm not going to go as deep as I would have gone otherwise, right? Because the strategies for change really do require us to have this basic understanding. Now, first and foremost, I know that a lot of people like ideas like this. You know, I think for a long time we got distracted in the field on putting our focus on prevention when it comes to, you know, like rape prevention is really easy. Just don't rape somebody, right? And I get that. I totally agree with that 100%. Like we should put some attention in this area of making sure that people don't rape other people. Or make sure that people don't sexually harass other people. But we have to remember that some people are predatory and that they understand what they're doing isn't socially acceptable, right? Like they're hiding their behavior, right? Think about people like Larry Nassar or Bill Cosby or Jeffrey Epstein. Now, these are prolific abusers. But remember, sexual harassment is on this continuum. And for me, in many ways, I see sexual harassment as that gateway towards that. Like you might have somebody who's practicing sexual harassment, but never actually rapes somebody. But it's not likely you're going to find somebody who rapes other people who hasn't participated in sexual harassment. You know what I mean? And so we have to make sure that we understand that. Like, for example, did you know that when it comes to like peeping toms, for example, like people who like peep inside windows, as a society, we think to ourselves, well, they're just kind of perverts. They like to take pictures. They're voyeurs. They're kind of gross like that. But once we actually talk to them and spend some time with them, it's just that they got caught in that moment of being a peeping Tom, and that's how they got that label. But many of them actually do have hands-on victims. And maybe it's more like we caught them while they were like trying to figure out their next conquest, if you will, right? So we do want to have some strategies that are rooted in reality. I do believe in the ideology. I promote prevention education. I think that if we started with kindergartners about how to have healthy friendships and how to have, how to have hard conversations and, how not to gossip, like all the toxic behaviors humans have, like if we spent time with the next generation, we could probably get at a lot of most of these things. But I personally don't think that we would ever totally eliminate things like sexual harassment, sexual assault, because so many people enjoy it, right? And we're not even really effectively talking about pornography. So if we really want to have strategies for change, we have to get at some of those small behaviors by creating this culture. We have to create a culture in our own environment, right? A culture where we have safety, right? Where people can feel physically safe and where people can feel emotionally safe. We have to have a culture where people feel like they can trust each other, where there's some dependability, where we function in transparency, right? We have to have a culture where we are collaborating with each other and we work towards mutual goals. Oftentimes we think about like, oh, let's create a space where we can empower victims. I want to help you reframe. We don't want to empower people. What you want to do is you want to create a space that's safe enough for people to access the power they already have inside them. Everybody already comes to the table with power. They come to the table with a voice, with choices already. It's just that sometimes they're not in a position in their current life, current reality to access those things. So we create safety for them to do that. While we're not going to talk too deeply about understanding the brain or the body, I think that that is the very first step, right? Understanding the trauma and the behaviors and what happens not just to the brain, but the entire body when somebody is stressed out, when somebody's scared, when somebody has a trauma history, makes the world of difference when we're talking about building a response, right? Because trauma doesn't exist just in this vacuum. Trauma exists because of your history of the world, right? You're bringing all your life experiences to the table. Sometimes when somebody's not reacting the way that you think that they should be reacting in this moment, maybe it was a joke and you're thinking, gosh, that was just a joke. You need to calm down. It doesn't really work that way because they're viewing the moment through their own eyes, right? And sometimes it's more useful to understand them. So let's talk about the brain in just this way. It's possible for someone to be traumatized by something when they feel a threat plus a loss of control. Right, this is what equates trauma, feeling threatened and a loss of control. That's what activates the brain's defense circuitry, like where, the brain goes into survival mode, whatever. We're going to talk about that just briefly. Now, here's the thing, is the changes in the brain occur even if somebody just perceives threat and loss of control. So let's talk about that for just a second. Now, historically, we used to talk about fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And I even mentioned freeze earlier, right? But actually, neuroscientists are starting to move away from this concept. Fight and flight were coined by William Cannon in 1915 when they were studying adrenaline. And from that perspective, it's probably pretty good. But now we know that victims and people experiencing trauma, they actually move into something a little bit different. It's probably more useful to think about survival mode, right? And when somebody's in high stress or trauma, they go into survival mode. When somebody's in survival mode, they respond in one of two ways. They either respond using their personal habits, their self-protection habits, the things that we cultivate in our lives that have gotten us from the beginning of our life to now, to survival reflexes. And I'm just going to talk about these two things because we really want to get at those habits. But we want to understand survival reflexes. So survival reflexes are things that we evolved, right? As animals, we evolved in this space. Once upon a time, humans used to live outside all the time. And there were these things that were out there all the time, right? Like, so imagine they were like tigers. Now, tigers are super, super smelly. And so what our early ancestors learned and their bodies learned and how we evolved was if we smell a tiger, like imagine you're outside, it's dark, everything's creepy, and you smell a tiger, you're going to go into detection freezing and you're no longer going to be mapping to safety, you're going to be mapping to threat. Now, if you hear the tiger, which sounds like this, then your whole body is really on high alert, trying to figure out if you're in danger or not, right? And this is really important for us to understand, because sometimes even in our social world, the perception of threat, the smell of the tiger, it leads to a very real possibility of an actual threat. That's how it all works. Like when you're outside in the woods and you smell a skunk, there's a good possibility that there's actually a skunk there and you're going to get sprayed, right? So that's important for us to understand. When it comes to sexual harassment and stuff like that, smelling the tiger are things like attitudes and beliefs, sexual harassment, making jokes, bragging, verbal expressions, right? Maybe even just like, hey man, they're just joking, you know, but maybe for somebody else, their experience, their tiger was the sexual jokes. And that was the thing that led to the physical expression of sexual assault, right? That's the smell of the tiger, is this toxic work environment. That's really important for us to understand, that when this is how our bodies survive. And for many of us, we smell the tiger in a lot of different ways. That's essentially what a trigger is. That's what a trauma echo is. It's a memory that lives inside your body that pops up whenever your body says, oh, something's off. We've been here before. You might be in danger. Pay attention, right? And that's why those are really valid. And we have to learn how to be able to tell our body, nope, not a tiger. You can go ahead and calm down now, because it's not a tiger. But thank you for responding like that, right? Trauma echoes are just basically like your little eternal warning system. We can dismiss them though. Now, the next one is habits. Now, imagine, for, if you will, this person right here is, you know, learning how to protect herself. Anytime somebody comes up behind her and grabs her like this, she's learning how to protect herself. She's creating a neural pathway on how to protect herself. This is her own personal habit that she's developing. Now, here's the thing. If even one variable changes, then it's no longer a habit. She didn't practice this against people that she loves and trusts. She didn't practice this against her coworkers or her friends. If the attack comes from the front, she didn't practice it. If there's multiple attackers, she didn't practice it. If there's weapon, she didn't practice it. If there's substances, she didn't practice it. If there's fear, she didn't practice it. Now, here's one of the habits that gets in the way of sexual harassment a lot. And this is where we can build programming and start figuring it out. It's the spirit of being respectful or polite, right? Quiet acquiescence can actually be a habit. When somebody is scared, they're smelling the tiger and they're feeling that fear. One of the habits that kicks in, because you don't get to choose your habits, right? Your habits are how you've lived your life. So imagine you grew up in the kind of household where your parents used to tell you that you had to hug creepy Aunt Bertie because that was what is polite, or that you had to respect people and not hurt their feelings, and that other people's feelings were so important that sometimes you were taught that your feelings were not as important as other people's feelings. Quiet acquiescence, right? And oftentimes people who are experiencing things like discrimination or sexual assault, when they go into survival mode, they kind of shut down, and the spirit of being respectful or polite kicks in. Let's watch this. This is my friend Nicole. She has this cool company that works with people who are in the, she's in the outdoor industry too.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Outdoor Defense. This week's topic is safety over niceness. What I mean by that is a lot of times we tend to feel like we have to be nice to people, even if someone's making us feel uncomfortable, even if our intuition is peaking. And we're so terrified of offending someone that sometimes we may make choices that aren't as safe for us. So for instance, if I am hiking and I notice someone is maybe standing a little close behind me on the trail, or maybe we're at the summit and they're just giving me some sort of a weird feeling, it's okay for you to speak up and say, you know what, I need you to not sit so close to me. Or, you know what, I'm not interested in having this conversation. It's direct, yes, it's blunt, but it's also firm, and it's setting a boundary. It's okay for you to set a boundary for what you need. And instead of worrying about offending someone, we need to worry about taking care of our safety. That comes first. Join me next week for another safety strategy with Outdoor Defense.
All right, so Nicole Snell owns a company called Girls Fight Back, and her work is really compelling. She's really powerful. And she talks about how to defend yourself in spaces like this, not just like self-defense moves. She does things like that too, but she's got a lot of things that help people overcome those internal habits and to build new habits. Because frankly, quiet acquiescence is part of the survival mode. So we have to actually train for having boundaries. We actually have to train for having hard conversations, right? We have to train for those things because those are not things that come naturally. We're not good at establishing a wide berth for ourselves. We're not good at having hard conversations. It's more likely that people will just not say anything or maybe even ghost somebody or curve somebody rather than coming forward and saying, hey, let's have a hard conversation, right? So that kind of stuff really does make a difference. Now, I want to talk about something else that I think is really fascinating. I just learned this year, and I thought it's so relevant in 5 different ways, right? So you have a social status, right? You have a status in the world. Like maybe you are a leader, or maybe you are a really good rafter, outguider. Maybe you're like super great at identifying plants, or you're the yoga instructor on the trip, or you are a musician, or you're just really wise. Like all of us have these things. We have a status within our community, right? We acquire respect or whatever. We're part of a community, and that status is really important. Actually, connection is one of the most important things for human beings. We all want to feel like we're part of the group. And when the group totally ignores you or doesn't talk to you or things like that, it kind of feels weird, right? Our status in the world is really important on a somatic biological level. So a threat to your status, a threat to your social standing, like experiencing a divorce or being fired or home instability, or, maybe a threat to your family or to your parenthood, right? That threat to status, which is really fascinating, sets off the same defense circuitry in your brain as if your body is threatened. That threat to status is much the same as smelling the tiger, right? When you're thrust out of the group or you're treated like an outsider, that sets off that defense circuitry in just the same way as if you are feeling threatened by being eaten by a tiger. It has the same response inside the body, right? So what we have to do for that area is we have to create environments where the culture is the most important thing, where we're actually creating opportunities for boundaries, and we're having conversations about conflict, and we're having conversations about connection and things like that. Those are really truly the places we're going to find some of the good stuff. Let's watch one more Nicole Snell video, and then we're going to start closing out because we're already getting to that point.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outdoor Defense. I'm here with a familiar face. This is a special guest, Danny Joy. She is also a lead instructor with Impact Personal Safety. You might remember her from season 2. We were doing some co-facilitated episodes on her series Fact or Fiction, which is now a
Vlog series.
So what we're going to do today is I had a viewer special request this video, and he has a younger sister who is being bullied at school by another girl. And he wanted to see a video on female bullying to see if the verbal strategies and tactics might be different. So Danny is here to help me demonstrate that. But first, we want to talk to you about the types of bullying that exist.
So there are 4 main types of bullying. There's physical, social, verbal, and cyber. And the thing that we see most commonly in high schools, especially in person, is social bullying. So that's the situation that we're going to see today.
Okay. So we are going to demonstrate a little scenario. Of course, this could work for anyone regardless of their gender identity. We had a very specific request for female on female, so that's why we are doing that one specifically. All right, so this is going to be it walking.
We're walking, we're just having fun.
And we're high school age.
Ish.
For this video, we'll be high school age-ish.
I mean, I guess that's a really cute outfit for, thrift stores.
Oh, you know what? I actually really like going to thrift stores. They have some really cool things. Have you ever been?
No, absolutely no. I guess that's something that you would do.
Oh, you know what? I'm so glad that you said that. It is something that I would do, and I just need you to respect that, and I don't need your feedback or your opinion on my clothes.
So that's a really great way to handle bullying situation, to set that boundary. Like, I don't want your feedback, I don't want or appreciate the feedback that you're giving me, don't talk to me, whatever you need to do to set that firm boundary. Especially when it comes to friends. I know it's really hard to set boundaries with your friends, but if you're feeling underappreciated or they're doing something that's making you feel unsafe or unloved, set that boundaries, and how they react tells you a lot about who they are as a person.
Exactly. We're gonna show another type of scenario.
We can't hang out with Becky anymore.
Why, what happened?
She just keeps sleeping with so many people, and you know what? That's some skanky behavior. Absolutely not. We can't have her in our friend group.
mean, why is what she's doing, what does it have anything to do with you?
Because it looks bad on us. Like, she associates with us, and they're gonna think that we're all like big skanks, and we're not.
I don't want to hear you talking about other people like this. That makes me really uncomfortable because I'm friends with her, and what she does is her choice. So I'm not okay with you talking about other people like that.
Right. Do you see how Nicole just kind of shows people how to have like simple conversations that we usually don't have, and that makes it really, that creates this different atmosphere. Now, obviously, these types of trainings and this type of strategy is really useful and makes a huge difference, but there's no way to really teach this kind of thing in this short amount of time. For me, I'm just kind of identifying a path forward, right? Did you know hope isn't actually an emotion? It's a skill set. I'm being hopeful in this arena, right? Like if we want to actually stop these things, we have to kind of follow the Department of Defense and start in those behaviors by promoting a world that we want, setting those values and guiding principles for your organization. Talking a lot about your values and guiding principles, right? For me, that would be the very first step. What are your organization's values and guiding principles? Do you believe in transparency? Do you want to be intersectional? Do you want to be, hope centered? Do you want to, lean into gratitude? Do you want to err on the side of compassion? Do you want, an empathetic thing? Do you want it to be full of respect and dignity? I mean, there are so many different values and guiding principles. For your organization, I would highly recommend coming up with your constitution of values and guiding principles and starting there, asking every person that comes into your space to adopt these, right? And then start by having these protective factors, centering on connection, centering on safety, right? Talking a lot about boundaries, practicing boundaries, having hard conversations. And then when you're not feeling like you're part of the group or you're not feeling respected in these spaces, that's okay, right? Like, you always have the choice to and create an open door and make it possible for people to come and go, but work really hard to do the things that you need to do. And be hopeful in those spaces. I really do wish we had more time, but I wanted to just leave at least 5 minutes to kind of just talk about these things. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Hours go by really fast. Here's one of the most unfortunate realities of criminal justice, and this is one of the reasons why I spend so much time in this space, is when it comes to investigating sexual assaults, they're really difficult cases to investigate. And there's a lot of non-investigation. I participated in this series. It's really fascinating if you want to read it. It's called the Denied Justice series. They pulled out, this journalist pulled 1,000 police reports and pulled together a whole bunch of people to read the police reports and code them. One of the things that I thought was really shocking from that exercise of reading all these police reports was how many investigations didn't even include calling the suspect, right? It's like the investigators, the first thing they do is they try to determine the credibility of the victim. They're looking to see if the victim is someone who can be honest, who has had past experiences with the law, and are they a drunk, are they homeless, are they unstable? Like, they're always looking at the victim first, and if they find that the victim is not credible to their own eyes, their own implicit bias, sometimes they don't even call the suspect. Sometimes they don't even investigate. They don't want to bother the suspect, right? That's why Larry Nassar got away with having 500 victims. And so, yes, it's one easy answer is call the police, but then the police come and they don't do anything, and you have to call them again, and you have to call them again, and you have to call them again, and nothing happens. It gets really demoralizing. I know that's not the best answer, but
no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's see, I got a couple in the comments. Let me Let's see. For extended river trips, participants commit to prolonged experience in shared space with people they may not know well. How can leaders convey to participants that the group culture will be safe? Well, one thing is you can't always guarantee safety. Like those are some guarantees that you can't. You can ask all of the participants to sign on to your values and guiding principles. You can have a clear grievance procedure. You can have a plan of action in case something goes wrong, right? You can, if say somebody is having is being really problematic on the river, what can you do in those moments? Like having that plan ahead of time is really, really important. I know that some of the outfitter groups have like a plan to remove somebody if they need to, but like say you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, how are you going to remove somebody from your trip, right? So each of your geographies comes with its own set of complications and your own specific response. But I would recommend thinking about these dynamics ahead of time, having a clear plan in case somebody experiences sexual harassment. What are you going to do in that moment? What happens if somebody comes forward and they've actually experienced full-fledged rape or sexual assault, right? With groping, once that line's been crossed and hands are in private areas and things like that, what are you going to do in those moments? And having that planned out. It's useful to have some training in investigations, but it's also better to have a contract with outdoor investigators. So then that way you can be non-biased in that space and you can have somebody else come to do that like inquiry type work, because it's really hard when you're the owner and you're having to do the investigation of a coworker that you've worked with for like 5 years, and it's hard to believe that they actually are capable of doing this kind of stuff, right? So it's useful to have an outside body. So I think you can't guarantee that they're safe, but you can have a plan of action and you can do all the things you can to create that healthy environment. Let's see, looking for resources to provide managers about addressing conflict. Oh, I love work on Simon Sinek's work. He's got a lot of cool stuff on how to have hard conversations, right? How to like self advocate in spaces like that. Like I would just start with some of that, because I know I get a lot of leaders who come and talk to me, and one of the things that seems to be happening a lot is like employees coming to their leaders saying, oh, Betty did this thing and I need you to fix it, but don't tell Betty that it was me because I don't want to have this toxic energy. So now the boss is kind of left with this bag of stuff, and nobody wants to own it. That's really problematic for leadership, right? That's a really tough place for them to be in. So it's always useful to like have this culture where people can start learning how to talk to each other directly, which is really tough. All right. So we're past the hour, but let me see this one. Along the lines of helping leaders with guests on extended river trips, can you recommend training that would help them prepare for dealing with intoxicated participants? Yeah, that one's a doozy, right? Because people who are intoxicated are unpredictable, right? Like some people are happy intoxicated, some people are unhappy intoxicated, and then you might even have happy intoxicated who their trigger point is really fast and they can get violent really quick, right? So it's really tough being in a space where you have to de-escalate people who are intoxicated. And in intoxication, alcohol and other drugs play a huge role in sexual violence and in toxic environments, right? Because people's natural inhibitions and their boundaries are lowered. And it can be really problematic. I think that that's probably a bigger conversation. Which you can email me. Here, let me put up my email address, and you can email me if you like, if you want to jump on a call, and I can give you resources where I can help you with some of these bigger questions.
Well, thank you so much, Myra, for joining us today. As always, your presentations are really engaging and so interesting, and it's a tough topic, but I appreciate you coming to talk about it, and everyone is staying with us here. And as we put into the chat there, we do have the next webinar in this series going to be taking place next month on September 18th. We've got Jim Miller from co-owner of Respect Outside joining us, and he's going to be talking about men as active allied partners in the workplace. So please register for that and check out some of the other things we've got going on in the series. And then also, as we also put in the chat, you can also reach out directly to the A- Collaborative, Myra, to our trainers. We have all sorts of different services. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a really great day.